Welcome to LinkedIn for Thought Leadership. In this brief webinar, I'm going to walk you through the basics of how to use this popular social media platform specifically for your thought leadership. All right, let's get started. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Mary Ellen Slater, and I'm the CEO and founder of RepCap. We're a content marketing agency that specializes in HR tech, insurance, and financial services. A lot of the work we do is around developing and spreading thought leadership in the market. I'm also the publisher of managingeditor.com, which is an online community of people who work in content marketing. And in a previous life, I was a traditional journalist. I worked for the Washington Post for many years as a financial editor and a career advice column. And I also spent some time working for SmartBrief, the big B2B email newsletter publisher. And because people often ask this, my degrees, I did not study marketing in school. My undergraduate degree is in agronomy, which is soil science, and I do have a master's in journalism. That always seems a little less surprising to people. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So let's get into our agenda. I've actually like to think about thought leadership in LinkedIn in two buckets. So the first one is thinking about your profile, because your profile speaks to your positioning and your differentiation. Who are you and why should people care what you have to say, basically? And then the second piece, we're going to talk about the actual content, right? Like, so what kind of formats, what topics did you talk about? We're going to dive into that a little bit. All right, so let's talk about profiles. And I always start here. People are always surprised because they jump and they want to think about, oh, well, what kind of stuff should I write? And what kind of topics? But really, the first impression that anyone gets of you as a thought leader is what is your profile, right? So what do you have up there? Like, is it differentiated? Can people tell like what you're about, what you're interested in, what you're passionate about? So before you start posting your contents and posts, like let's start here for a second, because a lot of y'all have some really scary profiles. Like, okay, they're not that scary. More, they're just not as awesome as you are and interesting as you are. So let's see what we mean by that. So the first rule that I like to follow here is the idea that giving people permission to be memorable, okay? Like my friend Mike Carden, who is one of the best marketers I've ever known and a serial entrepreneur, he has a saying that I have since incorporated into it's one of my life mottos. Anytime you're given the choice between being memorable and being professional, choose memorable, okay? I'm not telling you to be a jerk. I'm not telling you to be mean. I'm not telling you to do like crazy things. I am giving you permission, however, to be yourself. All right. And what kind of self do I mean in the context of LinkedIn here, right? So why you? What I mean here is, why should somebody listen to you? So in answering that question, I want you to spend a little bit of time in thinking about what is the education, the experiences, the credentials that you have that other people don't. Chances are, even if some of those things are things you share in common with other people, you've got a special combination of them that is just your own and is going to shape your perspective. Second, what things do you care the most about? Like, what are the issues and topics that you get the most excited about, that you love thinking about, that you love chewing on? Because those are the things that your thought leadership is going to naturally emerge from. And then finally, why should we trust you? I mean, this comes back a little bit into that credentials, education, question, whatever. But like, your profile is your chance to say like why someone should listen to what you have to say about this. And now I'm going to give you a great example of someone that I follow on LinkedIn that I think just hits all of these buttons beautifully. Her name is Madison Butler, and she's a recruiter, like a tech recruiter, and she lives in Austin. But if you go follow her on LinkedIn, what you will find is it's so much more interesting than that. I mean, she's really at the forefront of saying interesting things about D&I, about talent. She's an anti-racist activist. I think, she's got a great voice. She's a great writer. And, everything about the way that her profile is set up, you know exactly what you're going to get. You know what she's about, like at a glance, and you're either into it or not. And as she likes to say, she's not for everybody. But I challenge you, go take a look and see if she's for you. And even if she's not, take some inspiration from her positioning, because it's love it or hate her. I think she's thought provocative and amazing, and the true essence of what I consider a thought leader on LinkedIn in 2021. All right. So we've covered profile very quickly. But don't rush through that. Like, make sure you think about who you are and how you want to be seen on the platform. Next, the question I often get, is like, well, what should I be posting? And I've got this, what would a thought leader post? It's a little tongue in cheek, but the reality is like a few years ago, someone actually said something very similar to like one of my colleagues. Like we had asked a question about a hot topic in the industry. You know, we do these interviews with people trying to tease out their ideas. And we said, well, what do you say about that? What's your take? And they said, well, what would a thought leader say? And frankly, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard, right? Because the point is not to copy what other people say. The point is to bring your own unique perspective. And so in that spirit, I want us to walk through actually what are some of the topics, like how should you think about what you should write about and how you should think about the different formats. So first, let's talk about topics, because I do know that this stresses people out a little bit. And I put topics for LinkedIn into 3 main buckets, okay? I like to talk about advice, which is a pretty common thing you see. People will post things that are provocative. Like to me, that's actually true like thought leadership. If you get people thinking. And then they share stories that illustrate either those big ideas they're putting out or that advice. So let's look at some examples of that. So one of my favorite examples for advice, like as a marketer, again, whether I agree with him or not, Chris Walker is amazing, right, at Refine Labs. And he puts out these little videos where, you know, there's some copy here too, but where he shares his advice about marketing. And it's pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, sometimes, again, you could agree with it, disagree with it, but like it's valuable professional information. All right, up next. So that word I use, provocative. I actually think this is the biggest opportunity that people have. And I think that they get scared and they back away from it. But if you want to be a thought leader, like step 1 is, as I like this, it's have thoughts, right? And have interesting thoughts. And you can be provocative about this. You can take a stand. And in fact, I would argue if whatever you're saying isn't something that another person could argue with, like a sane, reasonable person in your industry, it's probably not thought leadership, right? Like if it's just like considered a truism. So basically what you want, you're not really looking for best practices here, right? You're looking for like, hey, have you thought about it this way? And I think Devin Reed, who is the head of content strategy at Gong, the sales tech company, does a great job of this. If you go follow him, he's got a great profile overall. But look, he starts talking about his tattoos. And the next thing you know, like thousands of people also, it turns out, have opinions about tattoos at work. All right, what's next here? So story. So this is another level of this, right? If you're putting out ideas into the market, so you can either directly give people advice, you know, you could kind of just throw out ideas and see what happens. But the other way that you can put out ideas by telling a story that illustrates either of those things. And if you're a good storyteller, this could be the way for you to go, right? So Diamoni is another person that I follow who he tends to write, I would say many of his ideas, you know, are just as provocative of like what the other 2 folks that I just mentioned are, but he delivers them in a slightly different way. And he often does so using pictures. He talks about his family. He talks about things that have happened to him, like in the course of his work. He's a great storyteller. So tell a story. Like it's okay to tell a story. You know, again, we have work stories and they can be inspiring and they can be useful to other people. We have personal stories that can illustrate the ideas that we want to put out. Embrace them. Share your stories. All right. So now I've given you some ideas, right? So you can sit down. What I didn't do, obviously, is spoon feed you like what a thought leader would say. So you're going to work that out and you're going to figure out what you want to say. Next, we're going to talk about how you're going to say it. And the formats, I think, have gotten really interesting because it wasn't that long ago when your choices on LinkedIn were like, just type some copy, maybe post a link. It was pretty limited. I remember some of us, we've been at this long enough, we got excited when they rolled out articles, right? So let's talk about what we can do on LinkedIn now. I'm going to start with what I think a lot of us think of when we think of sharing thought leadership on LinkedIn, or like the easiest, most obvious thing to do, which is like you put a link to like something else, right? You're linking something off the site, and then you may or may not offer some additional commentary about it. I will tell you, when it comes to the algorithm of LinkedIn, if you put in a link to an outside site, it's going to deprioritize you. You're going to immediately shrink your reach. In fact, when I was looking for examples of like people who've done this really well and gotten great engagement, it was actually incredibly hard to find. The best example that I found was actually a post here by my dear friend, Lori Rudiman, who writes a ton of stuff. She uses a lot of different formats on LinkedIn. She's got a great LinkedIn profile. Highly recommend that you follow her. In this case, what she did well when she posted a link and some copy is she was actually commenting on the story. It wasn't just, hey, read this link, right? Like she had something to say about it. So if you're going to use this particular format, That's what you need to bring to the table. It can't just be, here's a link to my blog. It can't be just a link to, here's a link to a news story. Like, we need you to say something. All right, more choices, right? So the other thing that is really popular, you'll see, and there's nothing wrong with this. I think sometimes we get pressured to do a lot of multimedia stuff, but you can get a lot of traction out of just plain text, especially if you're a good writer. And if you, this is like, I don't know, people often think about they want to jump to video and they want to do all these other things, but this is where I would start, if nowhere else. Like, just start writing. And Michael Eckstein is an example I like to use for this because he is an accountant who has built a great brand for himself on LinkedIn. And his posts are just text, and they're a mix of the other things. There's some provocativeness to it. There's stories, there's advice. There's a really, really liberal use of emojis for an accountant. I'm often kind of surprised, but he's also got a great profile. If you want to go check it out, this was a guy that, somebody once made a joke about him being the cutest accountant on LinkedIn, and he just ran with that and put it in his profile. So, but at the same time, like, the core material that he's actually sharing, like, it's, he can make those kinds of jokes, but he delivers the goods. Like, the actual content is excellent. So you can even use a little mild profanity if you want, but get out there and just start writing. Next, text and images. So this is another one that I see a lot of. And the example that I want to give you here is from Liz Willits, who is a marketer who is, again, absolutely excellent at using LinkedIn to spread her ideas. And she uses a lot of different formats. But this is essentially, I really enjoy what she's been doing lately. She's basically creating memes. These are work memes, and they're nicely done. They speak right to her target audience, and there is an idea in there. So if you get out there and you kind of check it out, if you're going to do this, if you're going to use images, don't just pick generic stock images. Take a moment, put a little love into it, and have that image actually say something. Have it actually communicate part of the ideas that you're spreading. So this is Liz. Liz is awesome. Next, I want to talk about video, because video right now, I mentioned the algorithm on LinkedIn, like, video is where it's at. So if you've got the interest, the inclination, the skills to begin to invest in making short videos, you will get great reach here. And when I'm sharing examples of someone who does video, like, really, really well on LinkedIn, I always like to bring them to Lorraine Lee. So, and I always say, Lorraine, how could she not, right? Like, she's a former LinkedIn editor, so she knows all about LinkedIn and, like, what works there. She's a great writer, so she's got the script stuff down cold. And then now she's working at Prezi, and, she's a great speaker. She delivers really well on video. And her videos, what I love about them, and the things I think they're great, is they're substantive, they're meaningful, and they have, like, just the right amount of polish to them. Like, she's getting up there and she's got great delivery and everything, but, like, she used, like, easy to access tools to make videos that I think are just perfect in terms of the level of polish and production for LinkedIn. You should definitely follow her. All right, polls. So I know that if I were to take a poll of what is the most hated feature on LinkedIn right now, I feel like polls would surely win. And I agree. Most of the polls and the way people are using polls right now, it's awful. It's annoying. And I will tell you, I have actively unfollowed people, like, in recent weeks and months, because I'm just tired of looking at their polls. Like, everything they post is some vacuous poll. That doesn't mean there isn't a place for polls. And in fact, I've got an example here of somebody that I think does polls really well. So this is Liz Ryan. So I mentioned earlier when we first came on that I used to write a career advice column. Well, I will tell you that among career advice columnists, even we all look up to Liz Ryan. Like, Liz Ryan is amazing. And the way she uses polls is she actually asks meaningful questions that don't have easy answers. Right? They're not easy, obvious answers. And then what they wind up doing is triggering these incredibly intense, thought-provoking conversations in the discussions. That, to me, is the definition of a good poll. If, like, you put up the poll and there's lots of good chat back and forth, then you've done something, right? That, to me, is thought leadership. Liz is a thought leader who's using polls like a thought leader would use a poll. And I love it. All right, last but not least, because I think this is where we have some of the biggest opportunity right now, is I am personally loving the newsletter feature on LinkedIn. This is a way for you to build up. If you're ready to commit to regularly producing content, and you've got a topic that you're really, that you're committed to, right? You got to go all in on this. The newsletter feature is a great way for you to build up an audience using the channel that comes back, and you can actually push things out to people. For the most part, LinkedIn is a pull platform, right? It's like you're going to come on and the algorithm is going to serve things up to people based on things that, it's not necessarily who you might want to see or who they might want to see or know they want to see right now. But if somebody takes that step of opting in to say, hey, subscribe me to this newsletter, that's a great opportunity for you to begin to build that relationship. So one of my favorite examples of this, one of the ones that I read every week, is This Week in Recruiting by Hung Lee. I'm a bit of a Hung Lee super, fangirl anyway. I already read like his regular email newsletter. He's got a great podcast. So he does a great job of actually not duplicating his content across multiple channels. I know that we get told a lot to go and repurpose things and stuff like that. And there's a certain element of that. Your idea is your idea and you're spreading your idea across different platforms. But what Hung does, I think, is really great. And why I love this newsletter is because here he has a successful email newsletter that already goes out every Sunday, the Recruiting Brain Food newsletter. This newsletter that he puts out on LinkedIn is not just copying and pasting that newsletter. It is something distinctly different. It's got this newsy hook to it. And it's a nice complement to the other things that he's publishing. And you can see he's got 17,000 subscribers. And it's one of those things where he's created this nice little suite of tools and platforms where people can engage with him like how they like to best. And this is a good example. So if you're not following him, definitely go check him out and subscribe to the newsletter and see how he uses it. All right, so those are all of our basic format questions, and it's a lot, right? And so I think sometimes people ask me, well, how do I decide which one to use? And my advice on that front is like the one that you should use is the one that you will use, right? That leans into your strength. So if you know you're a good writer and you're great with like, hey, I have a lot of ideas, I can just kind of pop these things off and post this stuff, just go text only, just write stuff. If you've got some design skills and you're a little more visual, go with text images. Go basically start making memes, start designing things to share. Again, video. I'm a huge fan of video right now, and it's what I'm personally going to be investing more of my time in over the next year. I'd say go follow Lorraine because she also publishes content around how to do better videos. It's a little meta in here, right? But if you're more comfortable in camera, it's better for you to do a 2 or 3 minute video and do a little light editing and push that out than to sit and obsess over what your copy looks like, right? So in the newsletters, I would reserve that for when you're ready to commit because you're going to want to publish at least once a month. You don't want to go any lower than that. And you don't want to be, just random about it. Whatever you start, set a consistent framework and put it out. Consistency is better than frequency for most of these channels. That's something I would say across the board. All right, so now you've got some ideas for your topics and how you want to brainstorm that. We've got some ideas around formats and different things you want to try out. You're going to go work on your profile. And so that really just kind of brings us through the basics of this, right? I mean, there's a ton of other things you can do, folks, if you're prospecting and sales and but that's a different thing. I would actually do your best to separate that part out mentally, strategically, and even from terms of your business objectives. Like your goal here is not to generate leads, from your LinkedIn post. Your goal here should be to spread an idea, like to take your good ideas and get them out, whether they're your big ideas, or they're just little ideas or things that you think would be helpful. So if you have any questions as you get started on this, please feel free to either connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly easy to find. You can find that actually posted it in the opening thing, but I'm just Mary Ellen Slater. It's got my whole name. And then also you can drop me an email. I'm at maryellen@repcap.com. All right. Thanks and have a great day.